Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Yeukai Business Show. My name is Thomas Rosenberg, and I'm your guest host today. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by Dr. Ronnie Gladden. Dr. Gladden is an international speaker, actor, author, and tenured college professor. They regularly speak about identity, diversity, and inclusion for K through 12 schools, universities, and nonprofits. Their approach centers on fostering identity reconciliation, empowerment, and independent representation via authentic, transformative, and diverse leadership practices. Dr. Gladden holds a doctorate in educational leadership from Northern Kentucky University, where they defended and published a dissertation on diversity leadership and intersectionality. They also hold a Master's of Fine Art from Miami University, a Master of Education from Xavier University, and a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Cincinnati. So, Bill, I know you're listening, and I believe that we have a lot to learn from Dr. Gladden about how to better understand the intersectional elements of our own identity. And you're wondering, how does this relate to business? So, one, it's thinking about how we can better support those folks around us to better understand themselves and to feel more empowered. And these lessons can also be applied to how we structure our organizational culture so that people working with us feel a strong sense of belonging, of being welcomed, and are thus able to thrive, because we know when your people thrive, your business is going to thrive. So, Dr. Gladden, welcome. It is a delight to have you here. And I would love it if you could briefly describe what listeners are going to get from today's episode.
Thank you. It's my pleasure being here for sure. Thank you for having me. So I think listeners will get an opportunity to refine their self-reflection skills, especially as we're moving towards the holidays. We're moving towards the end of this year, and we are moving closer to starting a brand new year. So as we're starting a new cycle and we're ready to clear some of the decks, why not reflect back on who we are, what we are, why we are, when we are, where we are, etc., and really doing a deep dive into our interiority so that we can better work with those that are in the external realms of our existence. So I think this is a nice self-reflective sort of podcast that we're going to have.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. So let's dive in. So I would love just to start with a little bit more about your background and what drew you to focus on identity, inclusion, and diversity in educational spaces.
For sure. I think it, and whatever it is, some kind of a force, some sort of unseen, unknown realm, whatever it is, pulled me into this. So I don't really think that I consciously chose this. Whatever it is consciously chose me, and it shaped the experiences that I had as a child. So growing up as an only child, I guess, gave me even more time to play in the realm of imagination. And that was fostered by my kindergarten teacher, who I learned from my mother, that said, well, when this child gets old enough to audition for the art school that's in Cincinnati, have them audition. And I did, and I was 9. And I made it in. And so that was a good place to foster the interest in the arts and to channel that imagination, into acting, writing, and the sort. So I think that baseline gave me an appreciation for various crafts and mediums. And that in turn helped to appreciate culture at large. So that would include what happens in businesses, but even more than just businesses, just within society itself. So there's that. The other issue, though, is I've had my own challenges with my identity as well. And I say that I am white and female in my aspirations, but Black and male in my complications. So that sounds very improbable, and it is. I'm not trolling. This isn't being a trans trender. This isn't just for something that's a soundbite. This isn't attempting to cut through, because this was a part of my dissertation, and I started that program in 2011. So that was really before I was doing anything with respect to social media, anything with respect to where we are now, with more people being more resolute and forthright about their identities. It just so happened that as I was finishing up the diss and as I was defending it, that's when a lot of this explosion happened. That was shortly after Caitlyn Jenner came out. That was right around the time of Rachel Dolezal exploding onto the scene. So it just was kind of serendipitous, but I was already working on this. And then I had some years of counseling even before the actual dissertation started. So my own improbable identity and truth trek and whatnot also really forced me for a long time, to grapple with what you see is not what you get, and really putting a new spin on that, and really trying to understand the dignity and worth of people, and recognizing that many of us have something inside of us that is running counter to how we would be coded in these computational parts. So I'm not unique in that way. For the longest time, I thought, oh, I'm so unique because that's how I identify on the inside. And yeah, it is different. It is improbable. When I was doing my dissertation and all of that, I didn't find anything where there was the embodiment, like one person with both of those identities. I saw things clearly on transgender, obviously. There was a tiny bit on transracial, but not a lot. But there was nothing at all on a person embodying both. And from what I understand, it's still pretty much that way. So my book that's forthcoming looks at that, White Girl Within. It looks at that, and it's a resource for others. But eventually what I learned was, well, while you may not have an inner Black woman or what have you, like most people are not going to be the opposite of everything in that way with respect to gender and race, but it will be something else. And so that really just helped me to recognize, again, that we are walking paradoxes, that we're complex. There's Dave Chappelle. A lot of people in my community aren't especially happy with Dave Chappelle right now. We request an audience with Dave Chappelle. But one thing that I do like that he said, and he is also a fellow Ohioan, by the way, too. He lives in Ohio, not far, just a couple of hours away from where I am. He said that comedy is a reconciliation of a paradox. And I love that statement, because you have to laugh at the kind of truth I have. A lot of us laugh at our situations. We have to kind of stay sane. And yeah, we're all walking paradoxes. We're all grappling with things that can be, very much contradictory. So in short, that's how I got here, was just this improbable truth trek and having an opportunity to explore the arts, and then in turn to really look at society through a lot of different lenses, and then wanting to do more work with that through teaching, speaking, coaching, consulting, training, writing, acting, all of those things. And then you put the butterfly effect into place, and that's how I guess I'm here now, right in front of you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. I'm curious, as you were looking back on the writing of the dissertation and also recognizing the white girl within, if you were able to also pinpoint something in your childhood, recognizing, I was actually feeling this, even if I couldn't put my finger on it when I was, pick an age, right? So I know 8, 9, whatever it happened to be for you. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but just, was there a time that you were able to sort of say, oh, I was starting to feel into that? And perhaps, as you said, like your complication at a certain age.
Yeah, I knew this, believe it or not, as young as age 4.
Wow.
So
okay.
I was, I guess, technically still a toddler. So I knew then, of course, the vocabulary wasn't there, but in terms of the image, seeing the shape and the mathematics of a Black boy body, and recognizing that that was not the sum for me, but then seeing around me the shape and the mathematics of young white girls, I felt like that is the sum of me. That much better would be the avatar, would animate me. That's been with me all this time. Now, of course, along the way, yeah, I tried to suppress it, repress it, oppress it, and I didn't try, I did. And then I got my ass kicked. And in some ways physically, but as well as more of a mental place just of doing that. And I did grow up with a very heavy-handed father, unfortunately, and a lot of people also unfortunately have that reality. But it was I was blessed to have a lot of my needs met and even some of the wants met, but that did come with domestic violence, unfortunately. And I didn't see this at the time, but in the book, as I reflected, I wonder if there was a part of me that wanted to be the exact opposite of someone that was heavy-handed with my mother, that was heavy-handed with me, that was difficult to work with on an emotional level, intellectual level, etc. So there is that part where I have to wonder that if there was something dissociative or whatnot. But even with that being the case, there's been a lot of attacking of my ignorance and attacking of some of the harder parts of that time. And yet this is still here, even as a tenured professor, even as someone with a doctorate, as you mentioned. So I think there's more to it than that. But in short, yeah, it was as early as age 4. I distinctly remember it. And one thing that's helped along the way in this journey is that I have heard from a few other people that have similar sorts of an embodiment. One thing that I think is really interesting, there's someone by the name of Luke Ruhlman, and I can say his name because he is already featured in a little documentary of sorts. And he's a white male child, but he has this uncanny connection to this deceased Black woman from Chicago. And she died in a fire. I think her name was Pamela Robinson, if I believe. And he ended up, as a 5-year-old, not even ever hearing of her, liking the same kind of music that she did. He was able to explain the fire almost exactly in the way that it occurred, that was documented. And he had this connection and the sort. And yet again, here's someone at the very opposite of what they appear like, but then having these sensibilities and these connections and the sort. And this is someone, interestingly enough, that lives just like 10 to 15 minutes away from me. So that's another part of it that's just like, so I don't know if there is something in the water in the Midwest or if it's this neighborhood, but you've got this white male child having these Black female sensibilities and connections, and so I don't know. I don't know how to explain that. There are a few other stories, but the point is, yeah, so I'm not alone in what is, I guess, really kind of esoteric. But again, I mean, we look at ourselves as humans, and a lot of us are going to defy stereotypes in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. Well, and also I wonder if there's something that we could learn from other cultures' approach to this, because I'm just feeling Western culture, broadly speaking, is a little rigid in this space historically. And I'm just thinking of like the two spirits in a Native American tradition or others, but also just wondering, there are still questions unanswered for some around reincarnation and past lives. And so just wondering, is that part of this connection? Is it something else? Is it part of our identity now versus our identity of previous lives? That could get into a very esoteric conversation. But I'm curious, saying all of this and just sharing these stories, I'm wondering, how do you bring this into schools? How do you help create that link to say, we need to be able to understand this better so that we can create a brave space for these kids, especially if we're talking 4, 5, 6, 8 years old, how that comes into to play, no pun intended, in the school environment, in the school culture?
I know how politically divisive things are right now.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, I would pause personally myself on introducing this to basically toddlers or kids that young. If I were to, I would totally rebrand and make it as age appropriate as possible and
Mm-hmm.
not really getting into the weeds. It would be very much age appropriate. I primarily are working with those that are in the secondary age range through college and
Okay.
older. So then I can have a different kind of articulation. But for very young, I would have to probably connect with someone that specializes in that realm. But in terms of making this land and putting this in language that a lot of schools can work with, is looking at this through the psychoanalytic, the kinds of social cues that are around us and how we process that
Mm-hmm.
and how we take it, how we ingest it, digest it, absorb it. Clearly it's going to be different for various folks. So looking at the social cues, looking at, things from a historical context, social, political, socio-cultural. So looking at it from that way, also looking at the subconscious dialogue that we have,
Mm-hmm.
which is nebulous because it's hard to pin it down. In terms of marketing this, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
so that educators and administrators can feel, one, comfortable with entertaining this, and two, being enticed by a good value proposition, I would say we're looking at things from the psychoanalytic. We're looking at the subconscious dialogue and trying to get a grasp on that, which can be a challenge because it's nebulous. Looking at the conscious dialogue and how we have so many thoughts, 50,000 thoughts or more a day, and trying to pen those down and make them behave. So it's looking at it from that standpoint and then making it land and connect with our own narrative, our own story that we can fill out, that we already do grasp, and of course, bringing that in. So there is, in research, there is, the ethnographic or the autoethnography, which is the study of one's own culture or the study of the culture of others. And there's a whole way to systematize that. And I do work with that. That was also a methodology that was in my disc. So I would say circling to that so that it is systematic. You can pen it, you can do surveys around it so that ultimately you can have some kind of measurable outcomes or you can see patterns. And I think that can help in a data-driven society for sure, and to give context to numbers. So I would say that's one way to work with this, is looking at it through that lens. And also too, just in terms of, the social cues, which is a part of one's culture, and just recognizing that that's pretty much a Western phenomenon, period, especially American. I mean, we want, whether if we want to realize it or not, we adopt from multiple other cultures, even those that are the most pro-Black people I've seen are folks that have straightened their hair. I've seen that they're wearing European suits. Okay, many don't have their birth names, and I understand that there's a system of colonialism, imperialism with that, but there are folks that still have that. So the fact that we are an amalgamation of many different cultures. A lot of us love our pizza. We know that that's an import. I mean, I could keep going down the list, and we forget some of these things because it's so insidious and woven into what we do that it's just there. So yeah, there is a history of cultural appropriation, and we should guard against that. We should call that out. And for anyone that is just trying to capitalize on something out of convenience, yeah, you do want to call that out. But there are those that have a deep appreciation and respect for various other cultures and norms and customs, and they adopt them. And that's a part of what has been done in this country since its inception, and it happens in a lot of many other nations just as well too. So it's looking at that for the cultural proficiency piece and cultural competency. So I'd say that there's a number of ways to look at it, and those are some of them.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing that goes well beyond just an educational component, right? It's not just the educational institution. It could be government. It could be businesses, talking about the intersectionality of our own identity, right?
Exactly.
And both as individuals, as communities, and as a society. And are there three pieces that people can implement in their own businesses, in their own organization, that they can take away from this and say, okay, what can I do to help support the exploration of others in this
Absolutely.
in this journey?
Yeah, one thing I would say is definitely number one, continue your research.
Mm-hmm.
So research those that work with you, you survey them so that you understand your team and their values and their missions and their various stories that they have to contribute, but also do external research. Find companies that seem to have really made a successful attempt at integrating a number of different people from cultural backgrounds, and look at that model and see the methodology that they've employed to make that work. So it's looking at those sorts of systems. So there's that element. The other thing under the research umbrella is maybe perhaps looking at AI and seeing how that may also be useful in some ways. So you have some kind of a technological component that's there, but definitely continue to research and to collect those narratives and those stories. Two, I would say, is you want to foster an open forum for collaboration. Yes, you do want people who are very adroit at speaking and that have an organizing effect on the team, but we don't want that to be to the fault of everyone else that may want to contribute or to share insight. So continue to provide, open forum for collaboration and discussion on others so that a lot of people can truly feel validated. So that would be the second one. The third one I would say is be careful not to be too overly concerned with appearances just for the sake of that, just because it may be convenient or just because it may be in vogue. I get you want to align your mission with the sensibilities of others, but sometimes things may work to where it seems like you're doing something just because it's the thing to do. You have to do work on the mission statement, a work on the core values, a work on the hallmarks of the institution itself, especially if there may have been challenges in the past with issues of sexism, racism, classism, what have you. What's a way to work towards that? Because there isn't going to be a magic bullet. This may be something that's a part of a strategic process where you have to have a number of pillars, and you recognize that this is a part of an agenda that is going to take 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years, or this is almost generational, and we have to look at this in cycles. So knowing the historicity of where you as an organization comes from and what you're doing long term to work on that, I'd say that. And the fourth thing is understand that you're here to get it right, not necessarily to be right. And so inevitably, sometimes mistakes may happen. And if you are, as a business, willing to admit to those mistakes, to admit to a faux pas, admit to something that's off, and you say, let's work to get it right, and you're earnest in that, I think that can help to help with processing intersectionality like you were just asking.
Thank you for those. Are there, aside from your book, The White Girl Within, are there other resources that you would recommend folks just to start with that external research?
Sure. I would recommend something as simple as movies that might feature some of the themes that would make sense for your experience, even if you've already seen them. But if you were to revisit it, and you're revisiting it in a mindful way, because you're looking at it through the lens of your intersectionality, like, of course, the movie White Chicks, from nearly 20 years ago would make sense in my situation, or a more forgotten film, but not necessarily a bad film, still a good one, Whoopi Goldberg's The Associate. And I don't know if you remember that movie or if you've seen it. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. That was, I want to say, like mid-90s.
Yeah. And she portrayed a white man in that movie. Something that's more updated, like Black Mirror. And there's this episode with Anthony Mackie in it, and he ends up, even though he's a Black male actor, he ends up portraying an Asian female. And there's some role play that's in there, a little bit of cosplay gone to another level. And so there's that. So imagine whatever it is for someone else, whatever your story is, your intersectionality, imagine a film or a book or a documentary, and then you try to appreciate it, based on your own sensibilities. And then you record that. You start writing it down and thinking about what that means for you on a conscious level, on a subconscious level, what that means for you, how you would interact with others. So I would say that some of the cinema could help. Theatrical plays can help. Documentaries can help. Even talking with a mental health professional and immersing yourself in that. A number of TED Talks. You find a TED Talk that is along the continuum of whatever it is that you think is speaking your language, immersing yourself in that just the same, I think could be good. Something that's on social media, going to Reddit and finding a space, or creating a space in Reddit or wherever else, what other platform, and you try to put a clarion call out there and have others to join you, and you begin a community. And that way, I think that those are some supports that could be really useful for people.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, because I'm sure there are folks out there who are just saying, okay, I want to get it right. I'm not worried about being right. I want to get it right. And I don't know where to begin. And so these are really super supportive suggestions. So thank you very much for coming on the show. How can people find you, and where can they look you up and connect with you?
So they can find me by checking out RonnieGladden.com, and they'll find the various kinds of diversity leadership supports and services that I offer. If they want to know more about the book, White Girl Within, you can go to whitegirlwithin.com and learn more about the book there. And we're getting close to pre-sale, so they'll be among the first to learn the latest on that. And I have a YouTube channel that will be coming out soon in the first quarter of next year. And they can go to ourbestletters.com. So that's OUR bestletters.com. And they can get a little bit of a preview that way. And then, of course, on Twitter and Facebook and Insta, the handle is at Dr. Ronnie Speaks.
Fantastic. You heard it here. All those different places to find and connect with Dr. Ronnie. We're going to have the links in the episode notes. So if you didn't catch them, you can certainly find them there. But Dr. Ronnie, thank you again. It's been a real delight having you on the show.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yeukai.businessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18, or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.